Okay, so this is graphing ellipses. Ellipses you can think of as being a flattened circle. So if you remember right, the formula for circles was x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And this is going to be related to it, but not exactly the same thing. Because what we've done, and we're going to play with this term right here, we don't really have one r. What we've done is we've sort of squished this thing down. So the first thing we want to start with then is, as we develop this thing, is let's start with our things which are common. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals 1. All right, and h and k again is your center. And like with circles, you have to remember to change the sign. Okay. Now the vertices are these points right here, coming off of our center. So let's look for the horizontal distance from the center out to vertex, and that's going to be what we call A. So that is A. And what we do is we divide by A squared. Okay, so now let's deal with the vertical distance from the center to the vertices, which is this thing, and we call that B. So the vertical distance is B, and in our formula we put it underneath the y, and we square it like we did with radius. So really, if you want to think about it, this is sort of like the radius in the x direction, and this is the radius in the y direction. And as you can see, we put the radius in the x direction underneath the x term, the radius in the y direction underneath the y term. Okay, so here's the basic vocabulary you're going to need to use. So now let's go in and work a few examples on how to do this. The working form equations. All right, now, so here we go. Now, even if they didn't give you this point right here, you should be able to get it because the center is halfway between our vertices, all right? And you can get that by looking at and counting out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is at 6. This is at -4. Halfway in between, you add them and divide by 2. So I've got 6 minus 4 over 2, which gives me 2 over 2, which is 1. Which means I need to go to 1 right there. And you do the same thing by averaging these 2 points. Or in this case, you actually put a dot between them. But the center, just like it says, is always halfway down these 2 things, or it's halfway between each one of our 2 vertices. So let's come back in and look at what we got here. My center, they were nice and put a dot, is going to be at 1, 2. All right, A. Now remember, A is the distance in the x direction. So start at my center, and I count out to my vertex. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So my A is 5. And I do the same thing for B. I start at my center, and I count out, and I go 1, 2, 3. So my B is 3. Now at this point we have all the information we need to do this. And these things are always equal to 1. So I'm going to have x minus 1 squared. That's going to be over my A term squared. So that's 25. Plus, and I'm going to have my y minus 2 squared. And that will be over my B term squared. So that will be over 9. And there's your equation. All right, so same thing here. I know I'm halfway between these 2 points. The distance is 2. So my center is going to have to be at -4 and 1. A, remember, is a distance in the x direction. So it is 1. And B is the distance in the y direction. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And at this point, we can write this thing down. So I'm going to have x, but I have to change the sign. It's a negative, so that's going to be plus 4 squared. And that will be over 1 squared, which is 1. And we usually don't write that. Plus, then I'm going to have y minus 1 squared over b squared, so that's 16, equals 1. And that is your equation. Okay, here my center is at 0, 0. A, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And B, I go 2. Now, one thing you'll notice, well, let me finish this one up and then I'll point something out. So my center's at 0, 0, so I'm just going to have x squared, because I'm subtracting 0 from it, over a squared, which is 36, plus y squared, because I'm subtracting 0 from it, over 4 equals 1. Now, one thing I'll point out here, and this would be a good thing for you to put in your notes, and I want you to go on Edmodo and post a 3-sentence summary, and this is one good thing to put in a 3-sentence summary, is that you'll notice that this one has or it's sort of squashed down. It's got its longest one in the x direction. And sure enough, my biggest number is under x. This one is elongated in the y direction. And sure enough, my bigger number is under y. And again, this one is elongated in the x direction. And my biggest number is under x. Okay. So now we're going to go back through. This will be the last example, and I'm going to turn you loose on it. Do not forget your 3-sentence summaries. On Edmodo. Okay. So the first thing we need to do here is, you'll notice they gave you an equation and they want you to graph it. So we write down our center. That's in here, it's a -3, which means we have to change the sign. That's a 3. The y is in here, it's a +2, so that's going to make that a -2. And then you plot this point on the graph. So I'm going to go to 3, -2, and there's my center. So now we write down the value of A. So A is going to be the square root of this number, square root of 16, which is 4. So now I get my vertices by moving 4 units to the left and right. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And you notice that point now we're at, well, we should be at 8 because, no, 7 because I moved 4. Started at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've added 3 to it. So my x value now is 7. My y value is still -2. And then I go for my center, and I'm going to move 4 units to the left. I'm going to subtract 4 from 3. That will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to end up at a -1. I'm going to have -1, -2. So now we get the value of b, which is the point underneath the y. It's going to be the square root of 36, which is 6. And now I start at my center and I move up 6. So my x value is going to stay the same as my center. So I'm going to leave those. But my y value is going to change. And then I'm going to move 6 units up from -2, which should put me at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it will be at 3, 4. And then I move 6 units down from -2, which will be a -8. Which is right here. So now I've got my 4 vertices, I've got my center, and I can go through and connect these things up. And graph it. And again, you should be able to tell this thing is elongated in the y direction because the biggest number is under the y term. Okay, so these are the notes you're going to get for this. It's short and sweet, your 3-sentence summary, and you're going to be working with these on the rest of them. One of the things you're going to have to be able to do is go back in where they don't put a center. They give you a graph, but they don't put a dot in the center, and remember, you find the center by going halfway between both vertices.